Everyone. So, looking at race, prejudice, stereotypes, and how groups interact, how the individual interacts with the other, this is dealing with social relations. Here's some more data about how attitudes of Americans have changed. And this is another study, the Hugenberg and Bodenhausen study, which is really connected to that implicit association test that you took the other day. So within this context, within the social psych context, remember that this isn't just about race. When this perception of being in the in group or looking at the out group, this is dealing with any kind of issue. So Palestinians and Jews, Bengals and Cardinals. Where I went to school, St. Olaf, we had a rivalry with the school across the river, the Carls, St. Olaf and Carleton, and men and women. So the article I gave you today was about gender roles, and there's some really kind of interesting information about gender. Here's one fact for you. And this is an interesting study. So the researchers from this study speculate that this slightly feminized face B here, subtly conveys this likable image, and people associate this with more committed dads. The researchers say that a feminized male face connotes kindness, cooperativeness, other traits of a good father, which from an evolutionary point of view would mean that women would prefer this kind of individual. So as we learn about all of these, all this data that we have that tells us people make assumptions about other groups, maybe the question is why? What causes this? What's behind this? Social psychologists seek to answer this question really with three different areas: social inequities, or social inequalities, social divisions, and emotional scapegoating. Here's social inequality. And we have a very important concept that is connected to this. It is the just world phenomenon. Read this study. And here's a nice slide. So here's this little fish. Little fish says there's no justice in the world. A bigger fish says, yeah, there's some justice. And the largest fish says the world is just. Consider that with economics. Consider that with race. Consider that with gender. With any of these groups, if you are part of that dominant group that maybe has the privilege, you might see the world like this. If you are part of a dominated group, a group that is oppressed, then you might see the world as this. This is pretty powerful because think about it, the statement, they get what they deserve, really comes from this just world phenomenon. Now, we're to blame for this. We teach this to our children, that good is rewarded and evil is punished. It's a nice way to look at the world, especially if things work out that way. But then, is it really safe to assume that those who succeed must be good and those who suffer must be bad? This would enable the rich people to see their own wealth as their own work, and a rich person to see a poor person's misfortune and lack of things as something they deserved. And these two important concepts we continue to talk about are this in-group versus out-group idea. In-group are the people that you identify with and you belong with. The out-group would be the others. Now, if we just look at this one from the context of race, a perfect example is think about people that you have an easy time remembering their faces of and their names, and people you might have a difficult time with. Maybe you don't even notice this. But what is commonly reported to me is that a student who is black at our school, at Blaine High School, is often misidentified. A teacher calls them by the name of the other black student in that class. A student who is white might have a similar kind of confusion with a teacher knowing their name, but the perception is it's not based on skin color, it's based on something else, maybe hair features or other kinds of features. Students who are Asian feel similarly here at Blaine High School. And you could, again, you could look at this from the context of, oh, wow, that person's racist, but instead of just throwing that word around, let's look at it from the context of social psychology. And if a teacher is white, a teacher notices within their group, a group of white people, a teacher recognizes differences within their group. And looking at people who are not members of that group, people tend to just group the outsiders as one group, as homogeneous instead of heterogeneous. Now, I'm using teachers as an example, but certainly they're not the only people at fault. I just had a kid in one of my classes the other day make a blatant comment about one blank, fill in the blank race student. And again, I don't know, the comment was, I don't know the person's name, it was a, blank. And this can feel very offensive to people, particularly if they're part of the quote unquote, if they're part of the out group. But it's a really important concept to think about with social psychology. Um, the tendency to recall faces of one's own race more accurately than faces of other races is called the other race effect. This actually emerges very, very young, between the ages of 3 and 9 months. And here's the term in-group bias for the tendency to favor our own group. And another thing to consider is the scapegoat theory. Political leaders can become very, very powerful if they can find one group of people to blame the troubles on. If we look at Nazi Germany, this is what happened. In fact, your textbook states that one German civilian is said to have remarked when he visited a concentration camp shortly after World War II, what terrible criminals those prisoners must have been to receive such treatment. So this is the connection between the just world phenomenon. They must have done something to be in the condition they are in, and the scapegoat theory, where if you are having troubles, we are likely to blame those troubles on one group. They are the scapegoats. Now, it's great to look at history and say, wow, I can't believe these people did this, but and it's fine to look at other countries and what they did, but your textbook cites some real examples right here in the United States. Right after 9/11, some people lashed out at innocent Arab Americans. Calls to get rid of Saddam Hussein could be traced to this scapegoat theory. It was much easier for our political leaders to blame our troubles on another leader in another country than it was to look at maybe the more complexity of the situation. And again, looking at this from a social psychology perspective, it is not just because we're stupid, it is not just because we're racist that we do this. This is what human beings do. It's something to be aware of, and we have to try to prevent these kinds of things. Looking at this from the cognitive perspective, this is just what we do. Remember, think about Piaget. We create categories, schema, and this is where stereotypes come from. Well, how do you fix this? How do you combat prejudice? Social psychologists, along with identifying these problems, they have come up with some studies creating some ideas of a solution. So contact theory. So you might have two very, very hostile groups. Consider Blaine Bengals versus the Coon Rapids Cardinals, and if there's some kind of greater good, some goal, you can create a situation where they would actually work together and appreciate each other. Yeah, common sense, right? So why doesn't this happen? Dealing with racial issues, dealing with gender issues, that kind of thing. And then here's just a recap from today's discussion, this concept of self-fulfilling prophecy, which you read about. And I'll stop for now. The next section will be about groups and behavior.